and terms.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
Affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello and welcome to GB News Sunday, and thank you for joining us this lovely Sunday lunchtime. Hope you're having a wonderful weekend out there. I'm Dawn Neeson, and for the next 2 hours I'll be keeping you company on TV, online and on digital radio. We've got a cracking show coming up for you, so don't dare go anywhere. Right, Angela Rayner is facing fresh questions over her tax affairs. She maintains she's done absolutely nothing wrong, but how damaging could it be for her party in an election year? Then, on the other side of the coin, we have Boris Johnson, who says it would be insane to ban arms sales to Israel, and he's criticised the Foreign Secretary for failing to rule it out. But is Bojo right? And research shows young men are more likely to be right-wing, while young women are more likely to be left-leaning. Why might that be? And are we ever going to have any more babies at this rate? Discussing that with my panel. But strangely enough, this show isn't about me waffling on, it's about you and what you think, your views. So let me know your thoughts on all the stories we're talking about today, or anything else you want to gossip about, basically. Very simple, email me at gbviews@gbnews.com or message me on our socials, we're at GB News. But first, it's news headline time with Ray Addison.
1 minute past 1. Good afternoon. I'm Ray Addison in the GB Newsroom. Our top stories. Rishi Sunak says the government continues to stand by Israel's right to defend its security 6 months on from the October 7 terror attacks. Marking the occasion, the Prime Minister said the UK is shocked by the bloodshed and called for an immediate humanitarian pause in fighting. He also urged Hamas to release its hostages and implored Israel to get aid into Gaza more swiftly. Well, meanwhile, the Foreign Secretary has used the occasion to stress that the UK's support for Israel is not unconditional. Writing in the Sunday Times, Lord Cameron said there is no doubt where the blame lies over the death of 3 British aid workers, and added that this must never happen again. John Chapman, James Henderson and James Kirby died in airstrikes carried out by the IDF on an aid convoy on April 1st. Former chair of the Defence Select Committee, Tobias Ellwood, told us the UK will be obliged to stop arms sales if Israel has broken international law.
I absolutely support Israel's right to prosecute and to go after Hamas after what they did. But I also disagree with Israel's military response, which seems to be without clarity of what its strategy is. What's the governance structure that it's working towards? What is going to be the post-security environment that it's building? What we're seeing is actually in information, we're seeing this conflict spread beyond the Middle East because of what's going on, because of what Israel is doing. That is why David Cameron is saying there needs to be conditions on what's going on.
The Deputy Prime Minister has denied claims that the UK is failing to prepare for war. Oliver Dowden is defending the government after outgoing Armed Forces Minister James Heappey told The Telegraph that only Ministry of Defence officials attended a wartime preparation exercise which was meant for the whole of government. Former Defence Secretary Ben Wallace has backed him up, saying that too many in government are, quote, just hoping everything will go away. But Oliver Dowden told GB News they're putting in the necessary work.
Well, I don't know the specific incident that James was referring to. It is the case that we carry out wide-scale exercising programmes across government. Indeed, I did one recently for a national power outage involving several thousand different people across government. Now, of course, there is more work that we need to do across different areas, but we have stepped up considerably our effort.
A man in his 20s has been arrested on suspicion of murder following the discovery of a human torso at a nature reserve in Salford. Greater Manchester Police launched a murder investigation after the body part was found wrapped in plastic at Kersal Wetlands. The victim is believed to have been older than 40. Chief Superintendent Tony Creeley says the suspect, who is from the local area, will be questioned today. 2 people have been arrested on suspicion of murder after human remains were discovered in a park in South London. The Met Police say a 44-year-old man and a 48-year-old woman are now in custody after the body parts were found in Rowland Fields in Croydon. The force say they believe the remains are those of one person. However, they have been unable to formally identify the victim at this time. A post-mortem examination is expected to take place today. Well, Scotland remains at risk of power cuts and travel disruption as Storm Kathleen continues to bring strong gusts and heavy rain. Flood warnings have been in place and the Met Office has issued a new yellow wind warning affecting the East and Northern Highlands, the Isle of Skye and the Hebrides too. Yesterday, winds reached 73 miles per hour in Drumalbin, South Lanarkshire. The Scottish Environmental Protection Agency are saying that there is real danger to life around causeways, coastal roads and paths. Meteorologist John Ketley told us it's still causing problems.
Yes, Storm Kathleen is certainly creating a few problems in the northwest of the country in particular, but it's blowing everywhere. And it's still blowing pretty strongly this morning as well. I'm sure there are a few trampolines being blown over, a few garden fences coming down as well. Kathleen is only just to the northwest of the Hebrides. It's just easing slightly, but it's still gusting over 60 miles an hour in parts of the northwest this morning.
For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code. It's on your screen now, or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to GB News Sunday with Dawn.
Thank you very much, Ray. Now, let's get straight into today's story, shall we? Some good ones coming up. Angela Rayner is facing fresh questions over her tax affairs. It's been alleged that the Deputy Labour leader didn't pay enough tax on the sale of her home in Stockport back in 2015. Using photos on her own social media accounts, the Mail on Sunday today claimed that she should have paid more capital gains tax because her house was not her primary property. Rayner has always maintained she's done absolutely nothing wrong and said she's received expert tax advice which confirmed her position. Now, given this is an election year, you may have noticed, what should she or even Starmer do for that matter? Now, I have got the best panel ever today. I'm really pleased they're on with me. We are joined by GB News senior political commentator, Nigel Nelson, lovely, and the very lovely and long-suffering, I have to say, former Conservative advisor, Claire Pearsall. So, and this is for all of you that yesterday said, by the way, that Nigel needed a firm hand occasionally, OK? Well, meet his firm hand. And she is here to keep him in line. Now, so, first of all, we are going to start with Claire Rayner. Now, this has been going on since February. I mean, it's really, you know, it's sort of like, you know, did she pay the right amount of tax? Was she even committing electoral fraud because of where she lived and where she said she lived? Da-da-da. Very confusing story. But basically, the bottom line is, has she maybe not been as honest, or is she a bit confused about where she was living at certain times, Nigel?
Well, I mean, she says she's not confused at all, that she's very clear what was her primary residence, and her husband and children were living elsewhere, and she used to go and stay. Nothing wrong with that. And if the council house that she sold was the primary residence, she was entitled to do that and not pay any capital gains tax. What's going on here is the Tories are looking for a scalp, having had so many of their own taken by Labour. So where we are with this one is that the Mail on Sunday are scrabbling around trying to find extra evidence. A few tweets doesn't constitute evidence that there was anything going wrong. The issue at the moment is whether or not she should publish her tax advice that she's received, which she says clears her. My view there is that we don't know what else is there, what private information might be there. It's not the same as publishing your tax return as, say, Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer do.
So, I mean, this is basically just playing politics ahead of an election. Stop picking on poor Angela.
It's quite outstanding, isn't it, from the Labour Party to turn around and say, well, there's nothing to see here, this is just the Tories looking for a scalp, when if the roles were reversed and this was a Conservative Member of Parliament, everybody would be screeching from the rooftops, they need to resign, sack them, get rid of them, this is outrageous. So I'm not sure that argument really stands up. And it's also...
What about scalps? I mean, your lot have had so many scalps taken.
And this is a legitimate scalp to take because it does look, it appears, as if she has not paid the correct amount of tax. Now, if it was a Tory that had done that, you would have been calling for people's resignations, so the Labour Party would be standing up there making sure that somebody had stood down.
I would have wanted to see the evidence.
But why aren't you demanding to see the evidence of Angela Rayner? Then you can't have it both ways.
In this situation, that no one's produced any evidence which suggests she's done anything wrong. There's all sorts of bits of suspicion swirling around there, but not direct evidence. And to come up with a few tweets that she made nearly 10 years ago hardly constitutes any evidence of wrongdoing. And the argument over the tax return is that, over the tax advice, is that there may be personal stuff there, in which case she doesn't have to share it. Somebody should have to come up with the real evidence to say she has done something wrong and no one has.
So we're supposed to just take the expert advice. I mean, I could get expert advice off pretty much anybody and say, well, I've had some expert advice. It doesn't mean that it's correct. And why would you not want to put it out there? You can redact any other personal information. But you can redact that. Have you not had a Sharpie pen to go through
I think you gave me a Sharpie pen. I've got one at home.
and you share the Sharpie as well. That's even more shocking. But the thing is, right, Keir Starmer has backed her without even seeing any evidence himself. Now, you know, I've run a newspaper. If someone was accused even of this sort of thing, I would have a quiet word and say, well, let's just go through this and show me that everything is fine and we'll move on. Keir Starmer says, that's fine, a bit, you know, I've nothing to see here, let's move on.
Keir Starmer's team has seen this evidence in the same way that Angela Rayner's team have had a look at it. What Keir Starmer says is, I have no need to see this evidence. Right. I believe what Angela is telling me. I believe that what my team is telling me. And what he's actually saying is he's respecting her privacy, which I think is actually the right thing to do in this case.
Well, I mean, the thing is, right, that I like Angela Rayner, by the way. I think she's feisty, she's personality, and let's face it, you know, Labour needs someone like her. I mean, she's the gobby working-class northerner who balances out the posh North London lawyer-type stuff. So, I mean, you know, she's always had very high trust levels because of that.
Yeah.
Is this actually now going to, Claire, colour how people's voters see her?
Well, I think it is, and it also shows the amount of scrutiny that Labour need to get used to if they believe they're going to win the election. They're not particularly happy with it at the moment. And in fact, I think it was David Lammy who said, well, you know, we're different, we're not the government, so we don't need to answer all these questions. And it's like, well, actually, yes, you do, because it's something that if it was a normal person on the street had this little, like, difficulty with tax, people would be all over it, HMRC would be crawling all over it, so why shouldn't they be held to the same account? And actually, politicians need to be above absolutely everything else if you're going to spend taxpayers' money and be trusted.
Well, we've seen that this week, all this week, with various politicians behaving in, some would say, a rather stupid way. I mean, how is this going to play out with the voters, do you think, Nigel?
Well, at the moment, there's no reason for the voters not to trust Angela Rayner, because we're back to the situation where no evidence has been put forward to suggest she's done something wrong. And yes, there's a bit of a cloud hanging over her that obviously when it comes down to a council house sale, you may argue that given that she would have been against that, she shouldn't have benefited from it. But that's like paying income tax, that a politician might object to their government's income tax, but they're still going to pay it. You obey whatever the rules are at the time.
I mean, you know, do you think that they have had a fractious relationship, Starmer and Angela?
They have.
He has sacked her once, remember, didn't he? And then she came back.
Or tried to sack her.
Tried to sack her. I mean, I don't think he can he? Because she's put there by the Labour Party themselves. Do you think, I'm just quickly running out of time on this one, but do you think he would have someone else beside him rather than Angela if it was his choice?
No, I don't, actually. I think it's not a dissimilar situation from Tony Blair and John Prescott, that Tony Blair wanted John Prescott there. They didn't always see eye to eye, but he was very important as the connection with the Labour Party. Same goes for Angela.
The gobby working class bit.
Yeah, and I think that actually Starmer needs Rayner much more than Rayner needs Starmer, and that's a really dangerous position to be for a leader. OK, well, Labour have given us a statement on this one, and they say Angela and her husband mutually decided to maintain their existing residences to reflect their family's circumstances, and they shared childcare responsibility. Angela has always made clear she also spent time at her husband's property when they had children and got married, as she was perfectly entitled to do so. Ooh, right, OK. Well, for all the best analysis and opinion on that story, you can go to our website, gbnews.com. Now, there's another story as well I thought these two would be brilliant on. Almost half of Tory councillors think Rishi Sunak's government is too left-wing. A New Savanta survey found that 47% believe the current Tory party under Sunak is way too left-wing, with only 24% saying it is too right-wing. Now, we've got an expert on this one, haven't we, Claire? I mean, you used to be a councillor, didn't you? I did.
Yes. What do you make of this story?
It's quite strange, and it does make me wonder who they asked, how many people they asked. I mean, it's a good polling company.
It's a Labour survey, wasn't it? Labour organised
It is. It's a Labour survey. So I would love to have seen the actual questions put to individuals, because it seems a very strange way of putting a survey out there, to put a poll out there, and what are they considering to be left-wing? What were the questions? Were they on policy areas? Was it just a general question? Are they looking at the age and the area that people are coming from? Was it all sort of concentrated in one area? So I think that we can take this one with a little bit of a pinch of salt. And I mean, to be too left-wing, there are lots of accusations that either the government is too right-wing, it is too left-wing, it is too one nation. I think we all need to make our minds up what it is we want the Conservative Party to be. That might help, and that might settle some minds, because at the moment I think that pretty much everybody's just going, we don't know what you stand for.
Well, I mean, do we actually know what either party stands for at the moment?
Well,
Nigel, I mean...
I think that there is a problem with both parties on that. I tend to agree with you. I think the case with the Conservatives, which is different from Labour, is that they're having a battle for the heart and soul of the party at the moment. Now, they're the party of government. They should be concentrating on government and fighting these kind of wars when they're in opposition, which won't be too long from now. So they can actually they can do that then. Now, what that survey also showed, that more than half of those councillors are dissatisfied with the government. Well, they've got a lot to be dissatisfied about. That doesn't necessarily relate to whether it's too right-wing or too left-wing, but those are decisions the Conservative Party needs to take after the election.
They're just unhappy with the way things are. I mean, it is very confusing at the moment, isn't it?
It is, and last year we saw a set of elections where an awful lot of Tory councillors, me included, lost their seat. So there's going to be a lot of disgruntled people out there already. We may be in a similar situation. It remains to be seen after the polls take place in May of this year. So I think the dissatisfaction in politics is at an all-time high. It doesn't matter if you're a councillor or a journalist or a member of the public. I think trust in politics and politicians is down the toilet.
How damaging well, do both of you, but you first, Nigel, how damaging do you think reform is to both parties? Because they did say they were targeting Labour as well as the Conservative seats, and we know they're putting a dent into the Conservatives. What about Labour?
Well, I mean, I think that most people who turn to reform are likely to turn to it from the Tory party. So I think reform is more dangerous for the Conservatives. Under the current polling, they won't win a single seat. So we're not looking at reform holding any kind of balance of power in the future. If they get above 20% in the polls, all that starts changing, and they actually could start winning MPs. So at the moment, you're talking about them coming second in a lot of Tory seats, and that is likely to deprive a sitting Tory MP of that seat.
Do you think there would be any difference in this poll we're talking about here, about local government, Claire, or about the main government, if Rishi Sunak went?
No, I don't think it would make any difference, and I think actually it would be worse because it would be yet another beauty contest, and I don't think people are going to suck that up. But it's quite interesting that Nigel says that the Reform voters wouldn't go to Labour. I think that in some areas that a lot of voters who voted for the Labour Party previously are unhappy with Starmer's version of the Labour Party. In sort of red wall seats where the Brexit vote was very, very high, if they're angry with the Conservative Party, they're not going to go to Labour particularly, but they are going to split votes in ways I think that we aren't really looking at. There's going to be an awful lot of tactical voting going on. I think sort of Reform voters will actually take from both sides of the political divide.
Maybe the red wall situation.
Yeah.
You know, former Labour voters who voted for the Brexit party, basically.
Yeah.
Do you think that?
Well, I mean, and the red wall, a lot of it was about Brexit.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah.
So that they were voting for the Get Brexit Done, which Boris Johnson promised and then, of course, didn't deliver.
Sorry, I brought it up.
So as far as actually splitting off from Labour, obviously it depends what you want from your government. But anybody who wants the kind of policies that Labour are putting forward at the moment is unlikely to find those at Reform. So I think it is more likely to be Tory voters who are fed up with the Tory party than the other way around.
Oh, it's a mess, isn't it, everybody? What do you think, though? I mean, you know, what even is right-wing and left-wing these days? I mean, do the main parties even know? Are you dissatisfied, whether you're a Conservative or a Labour voter? Are you confused? Are you considering voting Reform? gbviews@gbnews.com. Let us know. I'm Dawn Neeson. This is indeed GB News Sunday, and there's loads more coming up on today's show. Boris Johnson says it would be insane to ban arms sales to Israel. Is he right, though? All of that and much more to come. This is GB News, Britain's news channel. Don't go too far.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Children's stories like Peter Pan and Alice in Wonderland now come with a trigger warning at universities, alerting readers to possible themes of white supremacy.
Yes, these warnings are being applied to colonial narratives. That's the claim, commonly found in adventure stories and famous novels from the Victorian era. Well, joining us now is the actor Charlie Lawson. And Charlie, these warnings have been applied to Peter Pan and Alice in Wonderland. What's this university getting at?
Well, look, first of all, this is nothing new. We hadn't heard about it for a while. Universities have been doing this over the last couple of years. I remember having a chat with one of your colleagues. But when Gabriella, the lovely Gabby, phoned me up today, I had to beg her to put me on after 9 o'clock because I found myself getting rather irate about the whole thing. But I will do my best to be very polite.
Yes, keep it clean.
Yes, look, which is quite difficult for me, as you'll appreciate, over this subject. Look, this is universities just jumping on the same trying to be relevant bandwagon. Is it any wonder that we look at the quality of graduates from university, and in my humble opinion, some of them are slightly disappointing. But I did phone a couple of people I knew who had sons and daughters at various leading universities, and they had been speaking this morning. And thank the Lord, they think it's a complete load of bloody nonsense, as I do. Give the C.S. Lewis Centre a ring in East Belfast, because that's where your man came from. And I think you'll find you'll get short shrift, because we're not all about that in East Belfast. We don't censor anything.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Hello, welcome back to GB News Sunday. Hope you're having a wonderful weekend out there. I'm Dawn Neeson. I'm on your telly, online and on digital radio. Now, former Prime Minister Boris Johnson says it would be insane to ban arms sales to Israel. In his Daily Mail column yesterday, Bojo argued the move would amount to a government madness, arguing it could hand victory to Hamas. He also criticised Foreign Secretary David Cameron for not publicly dismissing the idea. Lord Cameron today warned UK support for Israel is not unconditional. Well, it wouldn't be. I mean, nothing should be unconditional. There are always conditions attached to everything. So let's see what my wonderful panel... They're still here and they're still talking to one another. Marvellous, isn't it? So let's see. Claire, what do you make of this? I mean, arms to Israel. Should we... I mean, there is a call out there. I mean, it's been described as sort of like virtue signalling today in some of the papers as well. What do you think? Should we stop selling arms to Israel?
I think a lot of this does depend on what has happened with the bombing incident that killed the volunteers in Gaza. It's one of those situations where I don't think there is a definitive answer until you have all of the information. And I appreciate that's a really boring way of looking at it. But we need to understand what exactly happened before you start to look at the consequences of it. Now, you can be a friend and ally of Israel, but also be concerned at some of the action that has been taking place. Two of these things, they're not mutually exclusive. And I think that we get lost a little in the argument when you talk about stopping selling arms to Israel, that people say, well, you are against the Israeli people, which is not the case. What you don't want to happen is allowing those innocent people to be killed by potential breaches of international law. I mean, that is incredibly bad, incredibly serious. And I think that Lord Cameron is right to be taking a really cautious line on this and not definitively saying one way or the other. I think that's where madness lies as soon as you do that.
Do you think Boris Johnson has a point, though, Nigel, when he says that Israel is the only democracy in that part of the world, and that would signal to Hamas that we are not as strong as we should be on the world stage if we did give in to the stop selling arms? And bearing in mind it is only 0.02% of Israel's armaments that comes from the UK.
Yeah, I mean, it's tiny. We actually buy more arms from Israel than we send to them. So, yes, I mean, as far as if we stop the arms, it wouldn't make a huge difference to Israel's military power. No, I don't think Boris Johnson is right. I think that the issue here is really clear-cut. And it dates back to before the attack on the aid workers. We could only sell arms if they meet the conditions for international humanitarian law. If the legal advice the Foreign Office has got, which says...
Which we haven't seen yet, have we?
Which we haven't seen. No. This is the key. You may not get to see all the details, but we could see the result of what the legal opinion is. And if that legal opinion is Israel has been breaking international law, we then have to stop arms sales. I mean, it's absolutely clear that they must come to an end. Now, I know arms sales are a murky business. We sell an awful lot more to Saudi Arabia, and they use British arms to bomb Yemeni children. But when it comes to the legal advice you're getting, that is absolute, and that is it puts the conditions on who we can sell our arms to and who we can't.
But we actually, I mean, out of the 48 nations classified as not free by Freedom House and with human rights issues, we sell 26. We sell to 26 of those countries, including Qatar, who are housing the bosses of Hamas.
We are. I mean, it is a murky business, and it's incredibly difficult when you start looking at it, the rights and wrongs of selling arms. It's not an easy conversation to have, because obviously we also purchase arms ourselves. So it's a trade that nobody wants, it's a trade that nobody likes, but unfortunately we're all part of it. And that's not an excuse, it's just what it is.
And also, jobs rely, British jobs rely on the arms trade. So there's always have to think about that.
The supply chain issues that we have, and the amount of companies in the United Kingdom that prop up that business. I mean, it is absolutely huge in economical terms.
So would it be hypocritical to stop selling arms to Israel, but carry on selling to other countries around the world who, as you say, are don't have brilliant human rights?
Well, I mean,
it's a polite way of putting it.
I think it was immoral to keep selling arms to Saudi Arabia, given what they use those arms for. So the morality of arms sales is, because Claire just said, murky is absolutely right, that it is a nasty business. These things are going out there to kill people. But in this particular case, it's not about our support for Israel as a nation. It is about whether or not that what they're doing in Gaza is disproportionate to what they should be doing. And if that crosses, and certainly the international court says it already does, it actually comes into genocide. If that crosses international law, we should suspend arms sales. Tony Blair did it, Margaret Thatcher did it.
We have done it in the past, haven't we? So
yeah.
But then again, where do we stop with that? I know the legal advice, and we haven't seen the legal advice, and that's the problem here with discussing it. But there's an awful lot of people you see, sort of like certainly on the marches, stop selling arms to Israel, without actually understanding.
It is, and that's what I mean. It's a very difficult conversation. It's a very complex area, and I think that sometimes you get entrenched in positions. There's the whole ceasefire now, stop selling arms, you must do this, and it's like, actually, that isn't going to help free the hostages, which is what everybody wants and needs, and it's also not going to bring humanitarian aid to those who desperately need it.
Or the ceasefire that we need as well.
Well, this is the other thing with the ceasefire. I mean, there is evidently a ceasefire on the table, but one of the provisos is the hostages are released.
That's right.
Hamas are not doing that.
No, but at the moment, Israel won't agree to the ceasefire either. So the question really is, the international community are pretty united on this one, as the Labour and Tory party are here. What there has to be is a proper ceasefire, aid must be allowed to get in, and the hostages must be released. So those three things are the components of a ceasefire. Until we can get Israel and Hamas to agree to that, it carries on.
So, I mean, this is the 6-month anniversary today, by the way, and you never, ever thought that we would be where we are with the horrific death tolls and the horror stories we are hearing, and, on the threat of starvation. So something has to give, but nothing seems to be giving. It seems to be some horrific stalemate at the moment that nobody has any answers to.
No, that's right. And also what nobody has any answers to is what happens afterwards. If we get the hostages released, if we get the ceasefire, if we get those agreements in place, what then happens with the disputed pieces of land? What happens to Palestinian people who have been displaced? Nobody has really thought of the consequences of all of this afterwards. How do you go about fixing that particular area? Because, again, that's another thing that neither side can agree on. So you are looking like you'd have one ceasefire, you'd get that bit sorted. It could potentially then start again because nobody can decide what to do with the land.
In the short term, the important thing is to get the aid through. So the one thing the ceasefire would do is allow aid to get in to feed people who are now starving.
Nobody's disputing that. But
in the long term, at the moment that Israel is saying Hamas has to be destroyed, Hamas cannot be the government of Gaza, we then need to find a new government for Gaza that would probably have to be provided by the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank.
Unfortunately, we have to leave it there. This is a debate that could go on all day and has indeed been going on for centuries, more or less, hasn't it? Thank you very much, both of you. I'm Dawn Neeson. This is GB News Sunday, and there's loads more coming up. But first, let's have a look at the news with Ray Addison.
Thanks, Dawn. 1:32, our top stories. Rishi Sunak says the government continues to stand by Israel's right to defend its security 6 months on from the October 7 terror attacks. Marking the occasion, the Prime Minister said the UK is shocked by the bloodshed and called for an immediate humanitarian pause in fighting. He also urged Hamas to release its hostages and implored Israel to get aid into Gaza more swiftly. Meanwhile, the Foreign Secretary has used the occasion to stress that the UK's support for Israel is not unconditional. Writing in the Sunday Times, Lord Cameron said there is no doubt where the blame lies over the death of 3 British aid workers. He added that this must never happen again. John Chapman, James Henderson and James Kirby died in airstrikes carried out by the IDF on an aid convoy on April 1st. The Deputy PM has denied claims that the UK is failing to prepare for war. Oliver Dowden is defending the government after outgoing Armed Forces Minister James Heappey told The Telegraph that only MOD officials attended a wartime preparation exercise, which was meant for the whole of government. Former Defence Secretary Ben Wallace has backed him up, saying that too many in government are, quote, just hoping everything will go away. A man in his 20s has been arrested on suspicion of murder following the discovery of a human torso at a nature reserve in Salford. Greater Manchester Police launched a murder investigation after the body part was found wrapped in plastic at Kersal Wetlands. The victim is believed to have been older than 40. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts. You can scan the QR code that's on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much, Ray. Now, remember, you can get in touch about everything we're talking about this morning or anything you want to talk about. Very easy. gbviews@gbnews.com. You see it on the screen there. Or message me on our socials at GBNews. And there's loads more coming up for you. Cracking show. Don't go anywhere. This one's great. Research shows that young men are more likely to be conservative, while young women are more likely to be more liberal, more left-wing, if you like. My panel, who have very strong opinions on this one. We'll be discussing this next. All of that and much more to come. I'm Dawn Neeson, and this is GB News, Britain's news channel, and you've just got time to put the kettle on.
Hello, here's your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. We'll see a mixture of sunshine and showers across the UK, quite blustery winds too. We have the remnants of Storm Kathleen up towards the northwest of Scotland there, tightly packed isobars indicating those blustery conditions. These bands of rain here on these occlusions moving in from the west at times, bring a fair few showers. Most of the showers up towards the northwest merging to some longer spells of rain. In fact, we have a wind warning enforced across the west of Scotland throughout the afternoon. Gusts of wind here up to 60 miles an hour or so at times. And notice quite a few showers moving in across Wales into northern England and the far southwest of England too. In the best of the sunshine towards the southeast, we'll see highs of 17 Celsius, 63 in Fahrenheit, but feeling colder towards the north in that blustery wind. As we go into the evening and during the overnight period, those showers across the south of the UK will tend to ease for a time, but notice some more persistent rain working back in from the southwest into parts of Wales, certainly by the end of the night. And towards the north, showers continue towards the northwest of Scotland. Elsewhere, some clear spells, allowing it to turn quite chilly. Parts of Scotland dipping down into low to mid-single figures, but holding up in the south with that cloud of rain coming in. As for Monday, outbreaks of rain gradually push up from the south across much of England and Wales. There will be some brightness for a time, particularly out towards the east and southeast. Best of the sunshine, though, generally reserved for parts of Scotland. Still some blustery showers towards the far northwest of Scotland. And temperatures once again peaking at 16 or 17 Celsius towards the southeast. That bit cooler towards the north.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me. My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning
not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Welcome back to GB News Sunday with me, Dawn Neeson, on your TV, online and on digital radio. Now, loads of you have been getting in touch, which is great because that's what it's about. On the general election, Jason, hello Jason, says, I have voted Conservative and Labour in the past and both have let me down. Time for reform. I think, a lot of people on both sides of the main parties are thinking that. Meanwhile, John says, I'm a white working class male. I was a union man, but never voted Labour until 1997 to get rid of the Tories. I voted UKIP, I voted Brexit. Now I'm going to vote Reform UK because we need a clean sweep of political incompetence and we need a strong and clear leader, which Richard Tice is. Interesting. Not alone either in that one. Meanwhile, Lawrence says, I cannot believe that you in the studio cannot see how left-wing this government is and it would be to their detriment. Well, I mean, you know what? I'm a bit confused about even what left-wing and right-wing is anymore. I mean, people are sort of like, just normal Conservatives are described as right-wing these days. I mean, like it's an insult. It's confusing, isn't it? Any case, it's time for a tale as old as time. Star-crossed lovers, Romeo and Juliet. He was a Labour Liberal. She was a Conservative Tory. Can I make it any more obvious? Well, research shows that younger probably not the best example, people, come on. Younger men, sorry, Nigel, younger men are more likely to be more right-wing, while younger women, yeah, you qualify still, are more likely to be left-wing, but you two are confused over this one. Why do we think this is? Let's see what my very, very happily married panel, well, as of now, make of this. So, Nigel, not so long ago, there was that T-shirt, Never Snog a Tory.
Yeah.
You quite clearly went a little bit further than snogging a Tory.
I did, but it took me a long time to pluck up the courage to ask Claire out. So we knew each other for about 2 years, and I couldn't actually... And we also knew we had different politics. I mean, Claire was a Tory Brexiteer, I was a Labour Remainer. It didn't seem to matter. Finally, I did pluck up the courage, and we had lunch at a Tory party conference.
Oh, that's very romantic of you. I mean, yeah. Hearts and flowers and Tory party conferences. What was making you wary?
Oh, it wasn't a question of being wary. I was just too nervous to actually come up and ask Claire out.
That's because Claire is a beautiful, blonde, attractive woman, not her politics.
Yeah, I didn't think she would go for me at all.
It was quite funny because we had this sort of conversation one day just before the 2017 election, and I was there sort of going, right, I need to pack up all my stuff. I may see you in 6 to 8 weeks' time when the election's over, so I hope you enjoy. What do you mean? Well, why won't you be back in here? It's like, well, because I'm not allowed to. So somebody that had worked in the lobby for a couple of decades at least, didn't know that people with parliamentary passes, as soon as the House was dissolved, we were out of here. And the sheer panic that left on his face, it was, I think, because he didn't know that we would be disappearing. And at that point, then, it was a case of, well, if you're going to do party conference here, would you like to come to dinner? And I negotiated that down to lunch for no other reason than I was on a three-line whip to do other things at party conference. But poor Nigel took that as a little bit of a dent to his confidence.
Yeah. No, but I mean, you two are obviously very sensible, and you know, you have brilliant debates in here, as I'm sure you do at home as well. And Claire did spend the entire day horse riding yesterday to get away from him, but you know, just saying. But you know, what is it with young people that they are so set in their ways now that, you know, women more to the left, men more to the right? I mean, why do you think that is for a start?
I've absolutely no idea why it breaks down like that. I can't understand that. Having read the experiences of a number of people since that survey came out and have been talking about it, is just they don't seem to be we're totally open about things. What we do is we talk about politics an awful lot. What we don't do is argue about it. But what it actually does, if two people with different kind of politics get together in a relationship, what you can do is you can learn things. That Claire's Brexit, I learned something from that about sovereignty and why she voted for Brexit, which I understand. I don't agree with, but understand it. She once mentioned to me, I'm in favour, for instance, of prisoners being, of 16-year-olds being allowed to vote. Claire pointed out, how would I feel about a 16-year-old going into an adult prison? Not comfortable, but it made me think about my position. And we have that kind of, because we're talking about it, you have that kind of discussion. It just makes you think, why can't young people do the same thing?
Well, exactly. It's open. Well, they're taught in universities now that you can only think one way. I mean, it's like, you know, groupthink. You have to think that way. But I mean, you know, as a woman, Claire, can you understand why young women are more drawn to the more liberal side of things?
I don't know. I don't know what it is. Because, well, I mean, I suppose I do. I did come across a number of young Conservatives back in the day, because I'm quite old, when they were still called the Young Conservatives, and it was mainly young men. And yes, you probably could. Your mother would be very pleased if you took them home, but really, they weren't kind of your type.
No.
So I think that probably when you're younger, you're a little bit more idealistic. Somebody from the left looks a little bit more interesting, maybe. Maybe they just seem a bit more of a free spirit, which is all very nice until you have to be responsible and pay the bills and all the rest of it. So I think there's a lot of it is that young people are really quite idealistic. Universities, as you say, are not tempting people into being open to other suggestions. I mean, we discuss everything and anything. No subject is off limits, and you learn to debate better. And I think that is a real skill that we're losing out on.
Very much so. Debate, not hate people. I mean, that applies in politics and definitely in marriage as well. And let's face it, if you agree with each other, it's really boring.
Yes.
I mean, really boring.
Yeah.
Hi, darling, if you're watching. Anyway, I'm Dawn Neeson. This is GB News Sunday, and there's loads more coming up on today's show. A fundraising campaign has been launched by the National Memorial Arboretum to help restore the Shot at Dawn Memorial. All of that and much more to come. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
TfL bosses have come under fire after banning an advert... Oh, God. They've banned an advert for a comedy show because it had a hot dog on it, because that supposedly promotes obesity.
The comedian Ed Gamble has swapped the image of the fast food favourite in favour of a cucumber instead. And there's the cucumber on the plate.
So is the UK turning into a nanny state? Let's talk to former presenter of Fat Families, Steve Miller, and nutritionist Olivia Parry. Good to see you both this morning. Olivia, it's a comedy show. He's not promoting eating hot dogs, is he? Is this just a load of nonsense?
The thing is, we have a huge problem with overweight and obesity in this country. We're fourth in Europe. It's big business. Advertising for food companies is big business. They make so much money. You just have to switch on primetime TV to watch, food after food advertisements. And we it's for the youngsters as well who don't have the nutritional education. We're not taught cookery in school anymore. People go to college and to university, they don't know how to cook.
But
and it leads
forgive me for jumping in, Olivia. Forgive me for jumping in, but the whole point with this is it's an advert for a comedy show.
Yes, I know, but this is a wider issue.
I think it's a load of old tosh, to be quite honest with you. It's a hot dog. In fact, I wish they'd have put onions on the hot dog. A bit of what you fancy won't hurt you. You should eat 80-20 anyway. You know, we talk about a nanny state. I actually think, arguably, we're becoming an authoritarian state. Opinions banned. Comedy banned. The England flag banned. It's like we've got to wear a virtual muzzle.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Welcome back to GB News Sunday with me, Dawn Neeson, on your TV, online and on digital radio. Now, the Memorial Arboretum in Staffordshire has started a fundraising campaign this month to try and raise £45,000 to restore its Shot at Dawn memorial. The memorial commemorates the hundreds of servicemen during the World War I who were court-martialled and killed for crimes such as deserting and cowardice. Our West Midlands reporter, Jack Carson, has the story.
In World War I, 309 soldiers from Britain and the Commonwealth were shot at dawn, the majority killed for the likes of desertion, cowardice and sleeping at post. Appearing at their court-martial with no real opportunity for defence, these men were told they had brought shame on their country and would be held in the highest disregard to discourage anyone else from doing the same. Today, it's widely recognised that many of the soldiers were likely suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. In 2001, the Shot at Dawn Memorial was unveiled at the National Memorial Arboretum as a way to remember the hundreds who had been killed. Now, more than 20 years on, the Arboretum has launched a fundraising campaign to ensure the preservation of the site. Mark Ellis is the National Memorial Arboretum lead.
It's a really important memorial here at the Arboretum, a must-see for very many of our visitors. So millions of pairs of feet have walked around it and looked at it. But it's also in an area of site that gets a lot of flooding, particularly in recent times. We need to raise around £45,000 to renovate and restore the memorial and to make sure that we can look after it for generations to come. The posts need replacing, the ground needs relaying and redoing.
In front of the statue are 6 conifer trees to represent the firing squad aiming for the target around the statue's neck. Andy de Comin is the sculptor behind the piece.
Obviously very young looking. The disc around his neck is actually a target. They used to either pin a piece of paper to them or have some sort of target for the firing squad to aim at so that it was over the top of the heart. You'll see that he's got no buttons, his epaulette's fallen from his shoulder. Part of the court-martial would have been dishonourable discharge, so they've been stripped of rank and insignia. His feet are trapped in this block. It's kind of a metaphor for the fact that he's trapped in a situation that he can't extricate himself from, and then obviously blindfolded, hands tied behind his back.
The memorial sits on the eastern edge of the Arboretum's site, where it's the first to be touched by the sun's rays at dawn.
On the 7th of November 2006, the British government agreed to give a posthumous pardon to those executed for varying military offences in the First World War. One of those soldiers was 17-year-old Herbert Burden.
He was part of the 1st Battalion Northumberland Fusiliers, and at 16 he had lied that he was 2 years older so he could fight in the war. 10 months later, he was court-martialled after leaving his post, reportedly to comfort a bereaved friend stationed nearby. The officers considering Burden's case heard his unit had been issued orders to make for the front just before he went missing. Private Burden faced the firing squad on the 21st of July 1915. At 17, he was still too young to even officially be in his regiment. Work begins on the memorial in early May, and with the help of public donations, the Arboretum hopes the memories of those shot at dawn can live on for decades to come. Jack Carson, GB News, Staffordshire.
God, that is absolutely chilling. And that isn't that long ago, is it? Nigel, you were involved in this, weren't you, in the fundraiser?
Yes, I mean, I got together with some MPs and we were trying to get pardons for the shot at dawn people. And as Jack just said, most of them were suffering from what we would know today as PTSD. The then Labour government were arguing that you couldn't give them pardons because we couldn't make judgments today about values that were held at the time. The contrary argument to that was, well, hang on, why not? There are people, at this point, there were still a few veterans still alive from the First World War. There were close relatives of the people who were shot at dawn. They wanted to see justice. Eventually, that argument won out, and eventually they did give the pardons, and of course, now we have the memorial.
And it's incredible, they were so young, Claire. I just can't get my head around how we would shoot people who are quite clearly distressed and 17, 18 years old.
And a lot of them probably would have been younger because, as Jack said, there were a lot of people who lied about their age in order to
My grandfather's one of them. He was 15 when he went in and pretended he was old enough to go because a girlfriend told him he would look dashing in uniform. Oh, he got into uniform, then she chucked him.
Did he come back?
He did come back, yes.
I mean, it's so hard to believe, isn't it, that we would voluntarily shoot a teenager because they were ill, essentially.
Yeah.
And, I mean, that's what it boils down to. If they were in the trenches and they were absolutely scared witless, which you would be...
God, terrifying.
And they didn't go over the top and then they were considered to be a coward or they were deserting or they just wanted to go home to their mums and they would be shot for it. I mean, it just beggars belief that, as you say, it wasn't even that long ago. And I think that is such a beautiful memorial site.
Yeah, it is. With the firing squad, trees planted around the...
But it's also where the light hits first. So first thing in the morning, the light hits that, which is how it should be.
Oh, it's really... If you want to know more about this story or how you can contribute, look on our website, GB News, and then all the information is on there, as well as more on Jack's report. I'm Dawn Neeson, this is GB News Sunday, and there's loads more coming up on today's show. But it is time, indeed, for that weather with Marco. Let's find out if it's warm or windy or a combination of both.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, here's your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. We hold on to unsettled weather across the UK over the next few days, all of us seeing further rain at times, quite blustery winds too. Storm Kathleen starting to move off the sea now, away towards the north and west of Scotland. Notice a low pressure gathering once again towards the south-west of the UK, and that's set to bring more wind and rain as we head into Monday. Back to this evening, though, and the showers are starting to ease across England and Wales, at least for a time, because as we go into the early hours of Monday, further outbreaks of rain start to push in from the southwest, certainly into parts of Wales by the end of the night. Whereas towards the north, a very blustery picture, certainly through the evening, some heavy showers around for a time. Those showers starting to ease into the early hours, more in the way of clear spells developing across the north of the UK, and in some rural spots, it could turn quite chilly by Monday morning. As for Monday itself, well, those outbreaks of rain out across parts of Wales will also become more widespread from the south across England and Wales as we go through the day. Some of those outbreaks of rain turning quite heavy across some southern areas into the afternoon. Whereas further north, Northern Ireland seeing some sunshine before rain arrives later. And for Scotland, it's a mostly fine day, lighter winds, more in the way of sunshine than on Sunday. And here, it shouldn't feel too bad with those fairly gentle winds, temperatures of 10 to 12 Celsius, peaking at 16 or 17, though, towards the southeast of England. Unfortunately, Tuesday looks very unsettled across the UK. Low pressure dominating the scene, further outbreaks of rain, quite blustery winds too, particularly wet out towards the north and west of the UK. And it stays pretty unsettled into the week ahead, perhaps a bit drier and a little bit warmer too come Thursday, temperatures up to 19 Celsius.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Okay. welcome. Thank you very much. Sorry, caught me doing my hair there. It's gazing at Marco, that is. Thank you very much, Marco. And there's lots more coming up on today's show. Britain has vowed to prepare itself for war. This is a really chilling one as well. Those are the words of one former Armed Forces minister saying we need to commandeer land to feed the nation and requisitioning consumer electronics and high-tech weapons. But what do you think? Oh my God, it's scary. All of that and much more to come. I'm Dawn Neeson. This is GB News, Britain's news channel. Don't go too far.
With thanks to Variety Cruises, a family company sailing since 1942, you have the chance to win a £10,000 7-night small boat cruise for two. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, you'll be able to choose from any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and explore Greece like never before. Plus, you'll also win £10,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer sizzle. And we'll pack you off with these luxury travel gifts. For a chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio, and online.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Oh my God, sorry. We could broadcast what we're talking about here, but we would definitely be off air within 5 minutes. In any case, welcome back to GB News Sunday. Thank you for joining us this lunchtime. Hope you're having a wonderful weekend. I'm Dawn Neeson, and for the next fun-packed hour, we have got some fun coming up. I'll be keeping you company on telly, online and on digital radio coming up this hour. Former defence ministers are warning the UK has failed to prepare itself for war. They're calling on the government to do more to prepare us for a potential conflict. That's not the fun bit, by the way, that's the scary bit. What do you think about that one? Meanwhile, David Lammy has snapped at his Labour colleagues who want to get rid of the Union flag from the leaflets. The Shadow Foreign Secretary says Labour should be proud to fly the national flag. But I want to ask, why do some people in this country have a problem with the flag in the first place? What's wrong with it? And later on in the show, find out why, this is the fun bit, why the famous Dorset knob eating competition has been unceremoniously cancelled. Find out after this. Any case, this show is nothing without you and your views, especially on the knobs. Let me know your thoughts on all of the stories we're discussing today. Email me at gbviews@gbnews.com or message me on our socials at GBNews. But first, here's the news headlines with Ray Addison.
Good afternoon. 1 minute past 2, our top stories this hour. Rishi Sunak says the government continues to stand by Israel's right to defend its security, 6 months on from the October 7 terror attacks. Marking that occasion, the Prime Minister said the UK is shocked by the bloodshed and called for an immediate humanitarian pause in fighting. He also urged Hamas to release its hostages and implored Israel to get aid into Gaza more swiftly. Well, meanwhile, the Foreign Secretary has used the occasion to stress that the UK's support for Israel is not unconditional. Writing in the Sunday Times, Lord Cameron said there is no doubt where the blame lies over the death of 3 British aid workers, and he added that this must never happen again. John Chapman, James Henderson and James Kirby died in airstrikes carried out by the IDF on an aid convoy on April 1st. Former chair of the Defence Select Committee, Tobias Ellwood, told us the UK will be obliged to stop arms sales if Israel has broken international law.
I absolutely support Israel's right to prosecute and to go after Hamas after what they did. But I also disagree with Israel's military response, which seems to be without clarity of what its strategy is. What's the governance structure that it's working towards? What is going to be the post-security environment that it's building? What we're seeing is actually in information. We're seeing this conflict spread beyond the Middle East because of what's going on, because of what Israel is doing. That is why David Cameron is saying there needs to be conditions on what's going on.
The Deputy Prime Minister has denied claims that the UK is failing to prepare for war. Oliver Dowden is defending the government after outgoing Armed Forces Minister James Heappey told The Telegraph only MOD officials attended a wartime preparation exercise, which was meant for the whole of government. Former Defence Secretary Ben Wallace has backed him up, saying that too many in government are just hoping everything will go away. But Oliver Dowden told GB News they're putting in the necessary work.
Well, I don't know the specific incident that James was referring to. It is the case that we carry out wide-scale exercising programmes across government. Indeed, I did one recently for a national power outage involving several thousand different people across government. Now, of course, there is more work that we need to do across different areas, but we have stepped up considerably our effort.
Police have named a man that they're hunting for after a woman was stabbed to death in broad daylight in Bradford city centre. West Yorkshire Police detectives have said they want to trace 25-year-old Habibur Masoom, who is from the Oldham area. They were called to the city centre on Saturday afternoon following reports of an attack by a man who fled the scene. The woman was taken to hospital, where she later died. Well, a man in his 20s has been arrested on suspicion of murder following the discovery of a human torso at a nature reserve in Salford. Greater Manchester Police launched a murder investigation after the body part was found wrapped in plastic at Kersal Wetlands. The victim is believed to have been older than 40. Chief Superintendent Tony Creeley says the suspect, who is from the local area, will be questioned today. And almost 5 million people have reported dental problems to the NHS 111 helpline over the last 5 years. Government data, which has been analysed by the Labour Party, revealed that around 965,000 people were referred for treatment in the last year alone. Shadow Health Secretary Wes Streeting said that calls are skyrocketing, with people having to turn to private dentists or even carry out their own treatment. Health Minister Dame Andrea Leadsom says the government's dentistry recovery plan will make services faster, but dentist Dr Sam Jeffwa told us the situation is getting worse.
There are lots of dentists who are burning out, who aren't able to stay in the profession because they're having to see 30, 50 patients a day to diagnose, treat, get them out of pain, all this sort of thing on a routine basis every single day. That can't be sustainable for anyone. And then we have an issue of the lack of new dentists coming in and the time frame being such a long time frame from getting someone qualified. So it's becoming more of an issue.
To get more stories, why not sign up to the GB News alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Back now to Dawn and GB News Sunday.
Thank you very much, Ray. OK, let's get straight into today's story, shall we? Britain has failed to prepare itself for war. That's the dire warning from the former Armed Forces Minister and former Army officer James Heappey. He's urging ministers to prepare for an armed conflict, calling for plans to be put in place to commandeer land to feed the nation and requisition, I can't say that word, consumer electronics for high-tech weapons. Former Defence Secretary Ben Wallace agreed, saying too many in government are just hoping everything will go away. Wow. That wasn't one to wake up to, was it now? Joining me is former senior military intelligence officer Philip Ingram. Philip, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I hope you're having a lovely weekend. Philip, this was scary. I woke up this morning and there were several things in this story that scared the life out of me. One, that we should be on a war footing, and the other is that government ministers didn't even bother turning up to any exercises. They send a minion, a civil servant instead. What do you make of it all?
I think it's shocking. The first rule of government is to protect the nation, and you can't protect the nation unless you're preparing for it. And if we look at, I've been involved in the international geopolitics game, whether it be in the military or commentating on it and writing on it for over 40 years. And this is the first year that I can see a clear path, or several clear paths, to World War III. We've got a major war in Europe. In Ukraine, we've got the Middle East falling apart, we've got China becoming more aggressive in Southeast Asia, and there are ways that those could join together relatively quickly. And unless you get government departments coming together to plan multiple different things and look at how we can defend ourselves, then you don't get the coordination. The Ministry of Defence itself in 1994 said it would take nearly 4 years' notice and 2 years of preparation to get ready to defend the United Kingdom. If the MOD's not doing it, what hope is there for the other government departments?
So why? I mean, you agree that we are on a pre-war footing, and we should be on a pre-war footing, and the government should be doing more. Why aren't they? Why aren't they taking it seriously, Philip?
Well, I think there's a complacency, and we heard the minister turn around and say that, I was only on an exercise a couple of weeks ago where we're looking at one scenario. Well, that's brilliant, one scenario. But as soon as you start to put multiple scenarios together and the impact on each other, that's where you need an overall response. And if the mechanisms of government, if our communication systems are removed, if Westminster disappears in a big flash, then how is government in the country going to work? Now, those sorts of scenarios are a long way off, if not highly improbable. But going through the process will identify how different government departments can interact better with other departments, can identify what are the key issues that need to be dealt with, can outline savings and efficiencies in the way things are done today. So this should be a routine part of what the government does.
And it's routine that they just don't bother turning up, sending a civil servant minion instead. So, I mean, do you subscribe, Philip, to the thought that we should be talking about a citizens' army? We should be talking about selective conscription. Are we at that stage yet?
A citizens' army is slightly different. It's an undefined term that people have thrown around because it gets sound bites. Selective conscription, if the military can't recruit and retain enough people, and I think last year they lost 5,000 overall, if you compare those that are leaving and those that are coming in. There's going to have to be some form of selective recruitment, and we should be looking at expanding the military. That's good for our economy. That's very good for our economy at the moment, just so that we prepare, because to get ready for the potential conflict scenarios that are there will take 2 to 5 years, if not longer. And if we don't start now, we're not sending a clear message to those that want to do us harm. That increases the possibility of them coming to do us harm. But if we start to prepare, they'll look at it and go, well, no, we'll not do this. And we're not going to lose out. It costs a lot of money whenever you look at it as just a single figure going into the Ministry of Defence. But most of that money is reinvested back in the country again. So it's good.
Philip, there's been a criticism also of sort of like, people aren't being recruited because we're concentrating too much on, the twin evils, as some people call them, of inclusivity and diversion, rather than concentrating on getting people who can just get out there and fight and do the job. I mean, do you think that has been a problem with recruitment recently?
I think there's a lot of that. The military is too PC. You know, I talk to people across the military all the time, and you know, they're having to jump through hoops and to do things that are disabling, and they're not being looked after in their accommodation. They're not being looked after in their terms and conditions. Military pay at the more junior levels is terrible. At the more senior levels, is significant. But the Minister of Defence in the Chief of Defence People's area has got an inclusiveness and diversity 2-star civil servant. Now that's a general rank that's in there, who's paid over £100,000 a year. Wow. With a complete department of people looking at things. I've seen zero beneficial output from that department, and they're all on final salary pensions. So Ministry of Defence is wasting money hand over fist on a lot of this, like a lot of other government departments are doing as well.
God, that's amazing. I didn't know that, so thank you for that, and thank you very much for joining us today. That is Philip Ingram, MBE. Then thank you very much, with some frankly fairly sobering thoughts there. Nigel, what do you make of this report and what you've just heard Philip say?
Well, I mean, I think that the problem really is that we've 80 years of relative peace.
Yes.
As a result of that, we become complacent. And we know that we've had to fight various foreign wars, so right from Korea down to Iraq and Afghanistan. At the moment, we're facing a situation where it would be very easy for a war to happen in mainland Europe, a serious war with Russia. All it needs is an accident to take place, a Russian unit crosses into NATO territory, plane gets shot down, something like that. The question really we've got to think about is, what do we need our defence to be? You mentioned conscription with Philip. Well, do we need a land army? Do we need conventional forces to deal with Russia? Or are we better off with the system that we've had since the Cold War? That's Trident submarines carrying 40 nuclear warheads, each one with 8 times the power of Hiroshima. However, it costs. It'll come to about £200 billion, more than the NHS costs us. Is that the best way of dealing with it? So we've got submarines that can pop up out of anywhere, fire their nuclear missiles, and that's a great deterrent. It depends what we want. Do we want to fight a conventional war? Do we want to actually win a nuclear war?
Well, when we tried the Trident one, it sort of was a bit of a flop.
Yeah, the recent test was somewhat embarrassing, yes. Yeah. But if it's all working properly, everything's plugged in properly, it should do its job.
I mean, we always thought, didn't we? I mean, as Nigel said, we've had peace for a long time, thankfully, at our lifetime. But I always thought that, it'd be more of a cyber war now. A conflict would be fought on a cyber footing. But you witnessed the scenes that we're seeing in Ukraine. It's literally back to the trenches.
It is, and that's why I don't think we can ever rule out having to have more people in the armed forces. And it is a fantastic career. I grew up in a forces family, so I'm always going to be really supportive of that. My son goes to a military school, so it's right there front and centre. But I think that we need to be able to fund it properly. Now, the MOD does not quite spend its money correctly either. A bit like any large organisation, I think there is a lot of money wasted.
I didn't realise what Philip said about basically a civil servant on £100,000 while we're sending kids into conflict, in theory, on 20 grand a year.
Exactly, and we need to invest in those people much more than we need to invest in civil servants telling us which pronouns to use and everything else. I think in a war situation, nobody cares. That's not to say that it's not important, but in that kind of situation, it isn't. We need to make sure that they've got boots. We need to make sure that they've got the correct equipment to fire with. They've got all of the backup that they need when they are overseas, which is inevitably what it is going to be. And we need to make sure that the equipment that we have is up to scratch, because unfortunately we are so low on some of the stocks of very, very simple things like weapons that we've got really old stock that's, you do worry that it's not going to work when it's absolutely needed.
Missile, yeah,
absolutely.
Case in point,
and
really.
it is the case in point. So if we don't use this stuff properly, if we don't invest in it, then it's not going to be any good when it comes to it.
So we need to invest more in the defence budget?
Probably we do, yes. I mean, the argument is...
Why is neither Labour nor the Tories committed to doing that?
Money. is a question of where you're going to put your money. And as I was pointing out with Trident, if Trident is going to cost you $200 billion, do we then invest it in conventional forces instead? What we can't do is we cannot afford both. And then what do you do about the NHS, pensions, and so it goes on? At the moment, we do not have the money to do everything. And so we probably can increase our defence spending to 2.5% of GDP, which is what Grant Shapps, the Defence Secretary, would like us to do, and Donald Trump wants us to do it if he becomes president. But we just simply can't do everything. Something will have to go from somewhere else.
Well, here's the thing, Claire. What about, I don't know, something like foreign aid?
It's too tiny, too small.
It wouldn't make an awful lot of difference, but it would help. Yes,
Not very
it would
much.
help. But
We're talking billions here. I mean,
right down the corner. It's
big ganged up on here.
It's defence. It must be a man's area.
Oh, yeah, it's bad guns, it's boy stuff.
Exactly. But the thing with foreign aid spending is that you've got to look at the projects that it goes on. Yes, there are some which we all look at as a very bad waste of money when you're looking at a space programme for places like Pakistan and helping the Chinese. Yeah, absolutely. But the majority of it goes to those places in, say, sub-Saharan Africa, where it educates women and children. It also provides healthcare, especially for women, which I'm very much in favour of. And you need to be able to look at what your programmes do. Do they educate people in the Middle East? Are they going to be able to get an education themselves, to be able to make their own countries a much safer and more prosperous place? So I think you need to be able to invest in those kind of foreign areas. It's incumbent upon us to be able to do so. And also, from the defence point of view, we do train an awful lot of those armed forces in other countries because we are the very best at doing it. So I don't think you could cut the foreign aid budget down. I think it would be wrong to do it. I think that is a whole other argument as to what you fund, but you can't cut it.
Right. OK, so, Nigel, it's about guns. You can talk about this one, your boy. What about, for example, we can find, I don't know, what, £7 million a day, is it, to put illegal migrants, many of them up in hotels? We can find money when we need it.
Well, I mean, we found money during the pandemic. I mean, you were talking about £400 billion that Rishi Sunak seemed to find down the back of a sofa and was able to pay furlough.
A very big sofa for a very small man.
Well, there's always that. So, yes, we can find the money, but in the long term, you would have to take it from somewhere else. We're now paying the price for the pandemic and the amount of money spent during there. If we think defence should be the top priority, that's fine, but it means that something else won't be. And there are too many calls in the public purse. It's as simple as that.
Start resorting the NHS out, maybe, making that more efficient. That'll save a few bob.
Yeah, absolutely.
But everyone's scared to go near that, aren't they?
They are. I mean, I think it needs real root and branch reform, not just actually twiddling at the edges.
Yeah, twiddling. A lot of twiddling going on. Knobs coming up, by the way. Now, for all the best analysis and opinion on that story and more, you can go to the website gbnews.com, and lots of you have been sending your thoughts in on the subjects we're talking about. Keep them coming. gbviews@gbnews.com. Andrew says, why is Israel potentially not allowed to defend itself from the aggression of a terrorist organisation, according to the UK Foreign Secretary? Why does Israel have to obey the law but Hamas doesn't? Oh, it's a lot of you agreeing with that comment. Meanwhile, Ian says, war is a dirty business. The attack on the aid convoy was an unfortunate accident. It's not the first time when it comes to war. I don't remember such a fury when, after the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, the US droned a vehicle containing an aid worker and children. Yeah, when America does it, it's friendly fire. That's how they get away with it, isn't it? Appalling. And Val has emailed in on the couples with different political persuasions. She says, over our 46 years of marriage, congratulations, 46 years of marriage, I can assure you that our politics have crossed several poles many times over the years, but it shouldn't be irrelevant. You don't need to like the same things, but you do need to want the same things to make a marriage work. Hallelujah to that one, yes. Right, I'm Dawn Neeson. This is GB News Sunday, and there's loads more coming up on today's show. David Lammy has snapped at his Labour colleagues who want to get rid of the Union flag from their leaflets. But why do some people in this country have a problem with that national flag? Find out after this. Much more to come. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Britain's newsroom. Weekday mornings from 9:30.
It's a remarkable story, isn't it?
Amazing.
Extraordinary. And also, she was unflappable, apparently, the Princess Royal.
She's
just
brilliant.
refused to get out of the car and said, I'm not going anywhere. Extraordinary. Well, Jim Beaton was awarded the George Cross for protecting the Princess, and delighted to say joins us now, along with the former head of Royalty Protection, Di Davis. Jim, you won't remember, but I met you some time ago at the Imperial War Museum when Princess Anne was opening an exhibition to do with the George Cross, and you were there reunited with her. And you told me then what great admiration you had for the Princess, cool under fire, but you didn't do so badly yourself.
It was probably my job. And also, I had a wee bit of police training, not very much, but a little bit, whereas Princess Anne had nothing. And yet, the way she displayed it, you would have thought she'd been highly trained to deal with any type of that situation.
Even though you'd had some training, you took 3 bullets for the Princess. You effectively stood between her and a deranged gunman.
Well, I was supposed to be a protection officer, really, so I just tried to fuddle about. You must remember that back in 1974, there was no communication, and we were extremely lucky that Michael Hills, who was outside Clarence House and nearby, had got one of the fast police radios, or radios on his shoulder, so he was able to send a message out. Otherwise, we would have just been relying on the good old public to phone in and say there's something happening.
Yeah.
So times have changed drastically.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
Affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Welcome back to GB News Sunday. Sorry, I've got voices in my head. I'm Dawn Neeson, and this is indeed GB News on telly, online and on your digital radio. Now, David Lammy, not often you agree with him, I should imagine, but Shadow Foreign Secretary David Lammy has had a go at some of his Labour colleagues who want to get rid of the Union flag from their campaign materials. Lammy said Labour should proudly fly the national flag, saying, "We will never stand it down." But I want to ask, why do some people have a problem with that Union flag? Let's see what our panel make of this one. She says, sitting in front of, proudly in front of, the Union flag design that is actually red, white and blue as well. I mean, that's not catching on these days, is it? We can have purple and pink, but you can't have red, white and blue. Now, for once, I find myself in complete agreement with David Lammy.
I know, me too, and I was all ready to disagree when you see the words David Lammy coming out. I was like, right, I shall never agree with the word he says. But he is right. Why should you shy away from using your national flag on a piece of literature, especially when it's coming up to a general election to...
Featuring the country.
Absolutely, to decide who leads this country with this flag. I don't get it. People get very upset about flags, and I feel that we just need to accept that this is our flag. We need to be proud of our country, proud of our flag. Don't be embarrassed by it. Why would you ever be embarrassed by it? And don't change it to pink and purple and all the rest of it. But why shouldn't it be on leaflets for a political party? I don't get the moral outrage at all.
I think there was a specific issue here. So what it was Labour MPs, especially in multi-ethnic constituencies, and what they were saying was that all the leaflets were the same. They wanted leaflets tailored more for their constituencies, and the Union Jack was very big. So when it landed on someone's doorstep, they might equally think it came from a far-right party or the Tories. So the MPs were just saying, could we have not let's get rid of the flag, but could we have something that is more geared up to our individual circumstances rather than a generic kind of leaflet that went across the whole country? So that's the background to it. I'm not against the flag. I don't think you have to wrap yourself in it to be a patriot. And when it comes to using the words pride, I'm pleased to be British. I'm not proud to be British because I had no hand in being British.
Pleased. Is pleased.
I mean, it's just ridiculous. You should be proud. You should be proud of your nation. You should be proud to be British.
Why should I be proud of something that I had nothing to do with? That I'm British by a complete accident of birth. It's not an achievement of mine.
I'm very proud with how we dealt with World Wars I and II, and I wasn't any part in that either. Slightly before I was born, but I'm very proud that we have a nation that pulls together when it absolutely needs to, and at the moment it feels a little bit broken. But when things go wrong, the nation comes together like never before, and I'm really proud of that.
Oh, that's different. You're talking about an action by the country, which I think is fine. If you all contributed to that, you can be proud of those achievements. What I'm saying is that I've got brown eyes, but I can't be proud of them because it's something that I had no control over. I've not contributed to that at all in the same way I've not contributed to my Britishness.
But you're also then okay. Well, let's just park you being pleased to be British, because that just seems a really wet thing to say. I'm terribly sorry. But the leaflets going out...
park it, but carry on.
But leaflets going out into communities that are a lot more diverse, well, a lot of those communities may well actually be British, just because they happen to be from a different background to begin with. Majority of them are second or third born British people.
I don't doubt
so I don't think they're going to be
a lot of people won't be quite pleased to see a Union Jack coming through on their election literature. Take all those points. The point the MPs are making is that it didn't work necessarily in their particular constituencies. We don't know which MPs made complaints, so therefore we don't know the constituencies involved. But they were saying all they wanted was something a bit more tailor-made to what they actually face on the streets when they go out knocking the doors.
And they are perfectly able to do that with their own election expenses. I mean, let me tell you, you can have the National Party literature and then you have your MP literature that goes out, and you can design that however you please. Certainly you can in the Conservative Party, the party of choice. You can do what you like, and I'm sure that the Labour Party also have very similar attitudes towards that. So I think this is a massive non-problem caused by a very small group of Labour MPs.
Well, it may be a small group. I was just explaining the background to it and why they felt that they would like it.
But by implication, your explanation, Nigel, does make it sound like they are ashamed of that flag.
No, I think they're worried about
it. They fear that their constituents will find the flag offensive.
Yes, and the issue there for some of those constituents will be far-right parties who have appropriated the Union Jack, and they've had problems with those far-right parties in those particular areas.
David Lammy grew up in the 70s in North London when the National Front were literally waving Union flags in his face. He doesn't have a problem with it.
No, he doesn't. And I'm sure there are an awful lot of people like David who wouldn't have a problem either. I've walked around his constituency with him. It's a multi-ethnic constituency. And yes, those are experiences he's talking about there when he was young were absolutely horrible. And he's proud of the Union Jack. That is his view. That's great. Same thing might apply in most areas of Britain, but in a few places where Labour MPs are going out to try and get votes, it doesn't.
Do you think then, Claire, we're tackling this from the wrong angle, rather than actually, well, OK, we understand you might be offended by the national flag of the country you are choosing to live in, and we have lots of people coming here to live here of their own free will. We start telling them, actually, no, you're living in this country, you should be proud of the national flag.
Can you imagine in America if presidential candidates were told that they couldn't use the stars and stripes anywhere during their campaign? I mean, I think there would be utter uproar, and quite rightly so. It kind of beggars belief that you want to be able to tell people, oh, we're terribly sorry that we're going to have to put a flag on it.
Yeah.
It feels very apologetic. I think you just need to be able to go out there and do it. People, as you say, people are choosing to live here. People want to live here. The flag is part of the identity of the country. Put it on there and don't make such a fuss about it.
Let me know what you think, because you wouldn't have this debate in Scotland either, would you, I bet? I mean, if someone said, oh, you can't use the saltaire on your electioneering material, that wouldn't happen, would it? Any case, let me know. gbviews@gbnews.com. I'm Dawn Neeson, and this is GB News on a Sunday. Plenty more coming up on today's show, but first, it's the news headlines with Ray.
31 minutes past 2, our top stories this hour. Rishi Sunak says the government continues to stand by Israel's right to defend its security 6 months on from the October 7 terror attacks. Marking that occasion, the PM said the UK is shocked by the bloodshed and called for an immediate humanitarian pause in fighting. He also urged Hamas to release its hostages and implored Israel to get aid into Gaza more swiftly. Well, meanwhile, the Foreign Secretary has used the occasion to stress that the UK's support for Israel is not unconditional. Writing in the Sunday Times, Lord Cameron said there is no doubt where the blame lies over the death of 3 British aid workers, and he added that this must never happen again. John Chapman, James Henderson and James Kirby died in airstrikes carried out by the IDF on an aid convoy on April 1st. Well, the Deputy PM has denied claims that the UK is failing to prepare for war. Oliver Dowden is defending the government after outgoing Armed Forces Minister James Heappey told The Telegraph that only MOD officials attended a wartime preparation exercise, which was meant for the whole of government. Former Defence Secretary Ben Wallace is backing him up. He says too many in government are just hoping that everything will go away. And police have named a man that they are hunting for after a woman was stabbed to death in broad daylight in Bradford city centre. West Yorkshire police detectives say that they want to trace 25-year-old Habibur Masoom, who is from the Oldham area. They were called to the city centre on Saturday afternoon following reports of an attack by a man who fled the scene. The woman was taken to hospital where she later died. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News alerts by scanning the QR code. It's on your screen right now, or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much, Ray. There's plenty more coming up on today's show. But before I tell you what we've got lined up for you, Nana, a queer show, is on after hours at 3 o'clock, and she joins us now to tell us what's coming up. Nana, what have you got on your show today?
Oh, well, hopefully you will enjoy. Coming up, I'm doing a monologue on Angela Rayner. So stay tuned to find out what that's about. Plus, my mystery guest, now this is my outside guest at about 5 o'clock, is a gangster. He's a gangster who's turned his life around. He's a CEO of a very successful company now. He'll be telling his story, plus he's got a new book out called Extraordinary. So it's down to the viewers to guess and try and work out who that person is. Plus the usual Great British debates. We'll be talking about kind of the same stuff you've been talking about, but do you think this country is prepared for war? Do you think we are? So all of that coming up on my show.
Yeah, brilliant. That sounds a cracker. Don't miss that one. Thank you very much, Nana. And remember, you can get in touch about all the stories we're discussing today by emailing us on gbviews@gbnews.com or message us on our socials. We're at GBNews. And right, there's loads more coming up on today's show. This is the highlight of the show. Why has the famous Dorset knob eating competition been put on the back burner? All of that and much more to come. I'm Dawn Neeson, and you really don't want to miss what's coming next.
Hello, here's your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. We'll see a mixture of sunshine and showers across the UK, quite blustery winds too. We have the remnants of Storm Kathleen up towards the northwest of Scotland there, tightly packed isobars indicating those blustery conditions. These bands of rain here on these occlusions moving in from the west at times, bring a fair few showers. Most of the showers up towards the northwest merging to some longer spells of rain. In fact, we have a wind warning enforced across the west of Scotland throughout the afternoon. Gusts of wind here up to 60 miles an hour or so at times. And notice quite a few showers moving in across Wales into northern England and the far southwest of England too. In the best of the sunshine towards the southeast, we'll see highs of 17 Celsius, 63 in Fahrenheit, but feeling colder towards the north in that blustery wind. As we go into the evening and during the overnight period, those showers across the south of the UK will tend to ease for a time, but notice some more persistent rain working back in from the southwest into parts of Wales, certainly by the end of the night. And towards the north, showers continue towards the northwest of Scotland. Elsewhere, some clear spells, allowing it to turn quite chilly. Parts of Scotland dipping down into low to mid-single figures, but holding up in the south with that cloud of rain coming in. As for Monday, outbreaks of rain gradually push up from the south across much of England and Wales. There will be some brightness for a time, particularly out towards the east and southeast. Best of the sunshine, though, generally reserved for parts of Scotland. Still some blustery showers towards the far northwest of Scotland. And temperatures once again peaking at 16 or 17 Celsius towards the southeast. And that bit cooler towards the north.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Gloria Di Piero. This is GB News, Britain's election channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Oh, God. Welcome back. It's GB News Sunday with me and Dawn Neeson. I hope you're having a wonderful Sunday afternoon out there. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate your time today. I'm on your telly, online, on radio, so there's no escape, basically. Now, lots of you have been sending in your thoughts on the general election. Alan says, I think the polls are way out. As usual, we are hearing Project Fear. Oh, my God, remember that. If you vote this, if you vote that, I'm voting Reform because I don't see another option. Lots of you are Team Reform today, it has to be said. Labour and Tories are just two cheeks of the same backside. Right, OK, well. Meanwhile, Andy says the reason a lot of the current government's promises haven't been delivered is because the opposition have been blocking them at every turn. I await with bated breath how many times Labour and Starmer use the excuse of 14 years of Conservative government to U-turn on any of their promises that they can't be achieved. Well, and a seamless link from talking about politics to a knob-eating competition. It's been cancelled, evidently, due to health and safety fears. The annual... I'm reading this with a straight face here, honestly. The annual Dorset Knob Festival is taking place this July with many games, including Splat the Knob, Putt the Knob. They are still going ahead, by the way, but this quirky event, and that's a word I'm using in terms of many others I could use, is a celebration of the traditional Dorset knob biscuit, a dry and tough delicacy made from bread, a bit like a rock cake, if you will. Now, knobs. Claire's sniggering. I mean, this is just, there's something about that word that brings out the schoolgirl in everyone.
And schoolboy.
And schoolboy, yeah, indeed, yeah. So, but this is, I mean, basically the serious side of this story is like a health and safety issue. Has said this is traditional. It's been going on for centuries. It's like you can't do it anymore because it's dangerous.
Well, I mean,
so there's a serious side to knobs.
I've never had a Dorset knob, so and you see, you can't even say this. Should we just sort of substitute the word biscuit until after
No.
after 9 o'clock?
So your confession is you've never had a Dorset knob.
I've not had a Dorset knob, so I don't know if you start eating one whether or not there is actually a risk of choking or something like that. So in the event of that,
oh, for goodness' sake,
is there a risk or isn't there? I don't know. Is there?
Really?
You can choke on anything. You can choke on a hobnob.
Well,
the bigs are available.
Yes, but it just health and safety is there to protect you from sort of getting run over and things like that. But you kind of think when it's something like this, it's just common sense. Yes, it might hurt if somebody throws it at you. It's a sort of funny-shaped, dense biscuit.
The throwing's okay.
The knob tossing is still allowed to go ahead.
So the fact is, so they're allowing you to chuck a knob across a distance, and that's not deemed to be unacceptable. But you can't eat it because you might choke on it. I mean, really, it's a competition. It's the very best of all things British. The fact that I've been sniggering about the word knob eating contest for several hours already and will continue to do so. It's just part of a tradition in that area of Dorset. And why should the health and safety individuals be all upset?
There's only a tiny bit of the tradition gone. I mean, you still throw knobs around the place. And what was that one? Splatting knobs.
I would love to see the official statistics for how many people had been injured during the knob eating contest.
Yeah, well, I'm sure it won't be as many as die in car crashes. But,
well, there you go.
But what we're talking about is something that might be a problem, and the rest of the festival can go ahead. So you're only taking a tiny bit out of the festival by saying, well, we don't want to have a corpse at the end of it.
You need health warnings on everything you put in your mouth, basically. Do not put this in your mouth, you might choke.
Well, I'm not quite everything, no. I mean, I need to fill it steak without thinking, oh, I must get health and safety in. I appreciate that. Yes, of course they have.
Exactly. You're such a... No, you're just being a complete fun sponge. That's all it is. You're taking the fun out of
OK, but I'm sure you wouldn't want to end up going in an ambulance to hospital and saying to the doctor, what are you here for? Knob eating.
He had to go there. He had to go there. Oh, yeah. If you are from Dorset, by the way, and you have been injured by a knob, please do get in touch. GBNews@GBNews.com is the way to go about it. How do you live with this man? He's terrified of putting anything in his mouth by the sounds of it, in case he chokes. Do you practice your Heimlich manoeuvre all the time?
No, I think there's an ambulance service. That'll be fine.
Do you know how to do the Heimlich manoeuvre, by the way?
Not necessarily, but I'm sure I could.
I'm not sure I want to go home now. Can I stay here?
Does that mean I get the sofa to myself then? Yes.
With a knob. I mean, they sound very tasty. If there are any other traditions from where you are in the world, let us know. I mean, this one obviously is a humorous side, but the bottom line is like, the powers that be are stopping something that people have managed to do for centuries without hurting themselves. Obviously, Nigel's never been, otherwise that would be a worry, wouldn't it? So let us know. gbviews@gbnews.com. If you've been injured by a knob or if you've taken part in any other local tradition that has been banned by the health and safety, the fun police.
The fun police.
I think we've exhausted all the jokes now. Coming up next, we're talking about wildlife preservation and beavers. No, we're not. That's a joke. No, that is a joke. No, we are... Any case, if you're offended by the use of the word knob, apologies. I'm just reading that out, by the way. I'm Dawn Neeson on GB News Sunday. There's loads more coming up on today's show. We're talking biscuits. Would you tell your spouse if you won the lottery? Oh, God. The man tasked with giving winners advice said no. All of that and more to come. This is GB News, Britain's news channel. Don't go too far. Get the bickies out.
Speech Nation. Sunday nights from 7 p.m.
Scotland's new hate crime law, which comes into effect on April Fool's Day, criminalises threatening or abusive or insulting behaviour which is intended to stir up hatred against people based on age, disability, religion, sexual orientation and transgender identity. The act has proved controversial. The head of complaints at the police watchdog says it could have a chilling effect on freedom of speech, but the bill's defenders say it is nowhere near as draconian as is being suggested, and protecting people from hate is long overdue. So joining me to discuss this, the Alba MP for Kirkcaldy, Neil Hanvey. Welcome to the show, Neil. Now, Humza Yousaf has come out and said there's been a lot of disinformation about this. People are overreacting. This bill is absolutely fine. Is he right?
No, well, I made a bit of a light-hearted comment on his claim that there was disinformation being spread about this legislation by saying he'd misspelled information. Because what's really happening is that people are spreading the truth about this legislation, and it's, nobody is saying that hate crime should be given a green light, but the way that this bill has been, or this act has been constructed, is deliberately intended to prevent freedom of speech, freedom of thought, freedom of belief. There are certain elements that are excluded from the bill, particularly around gender critical beliefs, and most importantly, sex as a class. So women's sex-based rights are not covered by this bill. The bill is silent on the definition of sex, and therefore same-sex attraction is effectively meaningless. And it really has a chilling effect on political discourse.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to GB News Sunday with me, Dawn Neeson, on your telly, online and on digital radio. Well, you've got a nice cuppa and a plate of bickies in front of you. I mean, we were going to get some for Nigel in the break, but he can't be trusted. He might choke, remember. Those nights must fly past at home. They really must. Right, now, this is another one that you can have a debate with your spouse about. If you won the National Lottery, would you tell your other half? A man who won hundreds of thousands in the lottery has revealed that he kept it a secret from his wife of 30 years. It was a fair bit of money. I mean, I think it was north of £500,000 right now. His defence was, we have separate bank accounts, we keep our finances separate. But Nigel, I mean, if you won the lottery, you'd tell Claire, wouldn't you?
Well, first of all, I don't do the lottery, Claire does.
No, exactly.
Claire buys all the tickets, so...
well, you might choke, I mean...
on all that money, well, indeed. Well, first of all, I don't know quite how you keep it a secret anyway, on the basis, well, the two of us, we work together, so we're pretty much in each other's company 24 hours a day. I'm not quite sure I could hide the brand new car that I might buy, some natty suits, things like that. Claire would actually realise instantly something had happened. But yeah, I'd tell her anyway.
Would you tell him, Claire?
Yeah, she's the one with the lottery tickets.
Would. Yeah, I mean, something like that, because you think, well, but we can go off and have a nice holiday, or we can buy something for the house, we can go and do all of those things. And it does make me laugh that you pointed out you might get a new car to put on the driveway. You don't like driving.
No, that's true.
So it's likely to be me buying the car.
It would be a status symbol. It would be only there for that reason.
The natty suit thing, possibly. But It's one of those things that we do spend all of our time together. I think that one of us would notice if the other one suddenly was just spending without even thinking about it. You'd notice a change in behaviour.
You would notice it, but you did this for an entire day yesterday on your own, Claire, didn't you?
I did. I didn't spend any money, though.
Does he know that? I mean, you could be not telling the truth. The weird thing about this story is the fact that this lottery advisor, he's told, I think, hundreds of people who won big. You have to win quite a bit of money. And what he was saying was that most people, you talk about, the flash car, getting a new house, etc., etc. Most people are really, really sensible. 95% of people who win big, who he advised, have been incredibly sensible with their money. They've looked after the children, the grandchildren, their own parents, that sort of thing. So most people do that first, rather than, as we joke about, rushing out and buying the Ferrari.
Yeah, and it probably is a joke. You'd actually think, well, good Lord, I've actually come into money, and what do you do with this? That it obviously would depend quite how much. If you won, I don't know what the latest jackpot rollover was on the Euro Millions.
It was like 63 million or something along those lines.
If you won that kind of money, there's all sorts of things you could do. Well, we'd all club together, we'd buy GBNews or something like that.
Yes, and have free biscuits on the desk all the time as well. This interview, the chap who was talking, he said, the thing is with the Brits, we're very reserved with money. We don't think we deserve to treat ourselves in the way some other nationalities might do.
But I also think it comes down to your background. I mean, before we got married, I was a single parent for 9 years, and I had to watch every single penny that came in. And I do like a bargain. I will always look to get clothes at a discount because I could never afford to do it. And I think that it's always that sort of mentality that you never know quite when some cost is going to come up, so you always want to have a bit to one side because of that. If the washing machine breaks, the car breaks down, whatever it is. So I think Brits are probably a little bit more sensible. We might have a dream list where we would go, we're going to go and live, for 6 months of the year somewhere hot and sunny. But when it came to it, you wouldn't do that. You might have your 2-week holiday, but you'd probably fix the garden fence or paint the living room or something very simple because you didn't have the money to do it previously. So that's like a treat.
Yeah. What would you spend it on, Nigel? If Claire won and was generous enough to share the win with you, what would you do? What's your dream?
I would like a nice house in Istanbul. We like Istanbul, and it's one of the places that... so it'd be nice to have a place there. If I could afford a second house, then in Athens, run away there. I also think that you'd actually think about doing something where a bit more than just giving it to charity, but actually doing something with some of the leftover money where somebody else would benefit. I think you'd actually feel a lot better if you did something like that too.
The other thing that came out of this was that a lot of people do that if they win, obviously. The one thing he said, this chap, he says, I really have to drum it into people that look after yourself first. Most people think about charity, think about their family members, not thinking about themselves.
It's good advice, that, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
That you do that. But I think you would actually think, I've come into money that I wouldn't have had any other way. Let's make sure it goes to somebody who needs it more than I do.
You'd want to make sure that your friends are OK. I would want to make sure that my son was OK. You've got grandchildren. You just want to make sure everybody gets a part
colleagues. Work.
Obviously. Good friends, I said.
Yeah, I think excellent. I like her very much. I'm not so sure about him. But anyway, and lots of you have been sending your thoughts in on knobs and health and safety. I can't put it any other way. Francis in Gloucestershire says cheese rolling is always under health and safety scrutiny. Actually, that's a point, but that does look dangerous, to be fair. Meanwhile, this is Paul says, in Lancashire, they have black pudding throwing competitions, and James says, on the knob eating contest, never laughed so much in ages, and Steve says, can everyone stop saying knob? My sides are splitting. I'm sorry, thank you so much for your lovely emails. Really made me laugh as well. I'm Dawn Neeson, it's been GB News on Sunday, but don't go anywhere because there's plenty more coming up on GB News today. At the moment, it's a fiery debate with Nana Akweer at 6 p.m, and then Neil Oliver with Free Speech Nation at 7, and followed by Mark Donner. But thank you so much for your time. Thanks, Claire and Nigel, for being good sports. So get the kettle on, pull up a plate of knobs, and enjoy your afternoon. Thanks for watching.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello. Hello, here's your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. We hold on to unsettled weather across the UK over the next few days, all of us seeing further rain at times, quite blustery winds too. Storm Kathleen starting to move off the sea now, away towards the north and west of Scotland. Notice a low pressure gathering once again towards the south-west of the UK. That's set to bring more wind and rain as we head into Monday. Back to this evening though, and the showers are starting to ease across England and Wales, at least for a time, because as we go into the early hours of Monday, further outbreaks of rain start to push in from the southwest, certainly into parts of Wales by the end of the night. Whereas towards the north, a very blustery picture, certainly through the evening, some heavy showers around for a time. Those showers starting to ease into the early hours, more in the way of clear spells developing across the north of the UK, and in some rural spots, it could turn quite chilly by Monday morning. As for Monday itself, well, those outbreaks of rain out across parts of Wales will also become more widespread from the south across England and Wales as we go through the day. Some of those outbreaks of rain turning quite heavy across some southern areas into the afternoon. Whereas further north, Northern Ireland seeing some sunshine before rain arrives later. And for Scotland, it's a mostly fine day, lighter winds, more in the way of sunshine than on Sunday. And here, it shouldn't feel too bad with those fairly gentle winds, temperatures of 10 to 12 Celsius, peaking at 16 or 17, though, towards the southeast of England. Unfortunately, Tuesday looks very unsettled across the UK. Low pressure dominating the scene, further outbreaks of rain, quite blustery winds too, particularly wet out towards the north and west of the UK. And it stays pretty unsettled into the week ahead, perhaps a bit drier and a little bit warmer too come Thursday, temperatures up to 19 Celsius.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You could win our biggest prize giveaway so far. First, there's an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. Plus, courtesy of Variety Cruises, a bespoke 7-night small boat cruise for two worth £10,000. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, your next holiday could be on us. Choose any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and find your home at sea. We'll also send you packing with these luxury travel gifts. For a chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns,
We'll be with